Hello, travel world. How is everyone doing? And I am coming to you today, Vanessa Russell, the owner of Global Luxury Travel. And I'm coming to you today to talk to you about a unforeseen medical emergency that I encountered while traveling to Mexico. And this happened May 5th. It's been some time. I know many have inquired about the details and what all took place, wanting to have more insight on what insurance looks like, and is it something that you all need to have on every trip. I'll say this. First of all, the disclaimer being that this was a very unique situation. Everyone's situation is different. So that being said, please take that into consideration. Also, hopefully after reviewing or seeing this video, other advisors in our industry will look to come together to make sure that our government is making sure that our travel dollars that are spent outside of America and in these other countries are also being used to protect us when we're in those countries. Because as you know, no medical services are like another in any other country. And there's no way that you can know anything or everything about all things travel insurance or travel emergencies. So just to kind of get into what happened in my case, I did have travel insurance before we left the country that protected both myself, my mom, and my father. And while traveling, we actually encountered a medical emergency. My mom ended up having a medical event, a stroke, on our way to Mexico. And because we were halfway there was no way to stop, turn around, or make any other decisions. Luckily, we did have a medical physician that was on board along with an ER nurse who was also there, luckily, that were able to kind of give us some insight on what was happening to my mom as we continued to make our journey to Mexico. So once we did land, they had notified the hospital that we had someone on board that's going to need immediate medical attention, and asked that everyone on the plane just please remain seated until the staff came on to escort my mom and my father off to the ambulance service. So once we landed, that did all take place. That being said, they still ask for custom information, so you still need to make sure you have that pre-filled out. Luckily, I had done that, printed it out, and we already had that information taken care of. But what became really tricky was the actual implementation of the travel insurance. Because I'm not with them, I can't make any of these concessions happen at the time because my daughter was coming in on a separate flight. So I had all of our luggage and I had to wait for my daughter because she had no idea this had taken place. Once my parents were taken to a facility, it was then where I learned that the facility demanded an upfront $5,000 payment from my father. Luckily, we have our business travel card under Global Luxury Travel, the Platinum AMEX, where we were able to go ahead and make that charge. But in the interim, having to invoke your travel insurance comes with a process. Something that I don't think a lot of us are aware, that you actually have to get a letter of guarantee, which there is no time frame in which they have to provide you this letter of guarantee from the travel insurance, which is another thing that needs to be looked in. So I'm making vigorous calls to the travel provider Allianz to get me this information. And they then have to verify from the medical facility that these services that are needed and are going to be rendered based on them giving this letter of guarantee. So now you're in a catch-22. You've got to first pay for your family member or your person to come into the facility and be assessed. However, you've got to come out of pocket, and before they'll give the assessment, that needs to be paid. And then before your insurance will facilitate that guaranteed payment, they need to have the assessment. So it's a really dangerous, crazy situation that if you were having, like my mom, a stroke or a heart attack or a baby or something unforeseen, imagine having to wait in the balance for these types of transactions to happen. What seems like, forever, because there's no time frame on it. There just isn't. And that's unfortunate, and that's something that needs to be looked into on the travel agent, or excuse me, on the travel insurance side, as to there needs to be a turnaround time in which you get this letter of guarantee to the medical physicians. And we should not be allowing facilities to demand we make payment in order to see us as travelers. We're feeding the economy of Mexico. If it wasn't for Americans coming there as rigorous and as vigorously as we are, they would not be able to survive without American travelers. So this is something I'm definitely going to be taking to my congressman and my state representative. And I would suggest all agents, all advisors do the exact same thing. We're providing their economy with its economical, safety, basically based on us going there. And this is the type of service that we received. So after they demanded that money, we paid it. My mom was, serviced. We came and visited her every single day, making sure that they were giving her the proper care, which they were. This was at a private facility in Mexico in the Cancun area. However, within a few days, they were demanding another $29,000, and that if we didn't come up with that money, that she would be moved to a facility that is housed of just the locals, a public facility. And let me tell you, this public facility is like nothing you've ever seen before. It was the most traumatic situation I couldn't even imagine have seen. So because of this demand, it wasn't until 2:30 in the morning when we were trying to go ahead and make that $29,000 payment that we found they ran my dad's credit card for $49,000. So of course it came up with a fraud alert. And so that payment was not processed. And then they, without our permission, moved my mother over to a public facility that wasn't fit for a dog. It was the most horrific place I'd ever seen in my life. Just to give you an idea, it was like a scene from the show MASH. They were using manual typewriters to input data, which was very scary. They had billy clubs that closed the door into where the patients were, and you had patients that were housed in hallways with chains on their wrists and arms and things of this sort. So it was really, really horrendous. So one of the important factors that you need to know when you're getting travel insurance, not only do you need to know how much coverage it is, but what is it actually covering? Your treatment of service is the most important thing. You want to make sure you have the maximum amount, at minimum $500,000 for treatment of service. Do you know what the difference is between repatriation and going ahead and just medevacing you? So repatriation will just take you back to your home without a medical ambulance, and evacuation will only medevac you to the nearest facility that can take care of your needs. So being careful to note that if that medical facility is still in that country, that does not mean or guarantee that you're going to go back to your home of origin via medevac. So that's something that you really definitely want to look into. Medevac was covered, thank goodness, with the policy that I had. However, again, it became a battle between the insurance and the process and how long this was going to take. We arrived on May 5th. My mom did not get medevaced out until May 13th. And in the interim of her being transported back and forth to the private facility and then the public facility, we also incurred fees for ambulance services. So if you want something to move on your time, you're going to pay. If you want it to move on your insurer's time, then they're going to pay. Keep in mind, the level of severity is not necessarily taken in consideration, because had it been, the insurance would have invoked them to go ahead and transport my mom on their dime, but they didn't. We came out of pocket and had to do that ourselves. I also reached out to the U.S. consulate, which unfortunately was no help for me in Mexico. I did things that the consulate could not do. At the public facility, they demanded that we go buy our own medication and things of that sort. I went to 5 pharmacies that did not have the medication that was needed to take care of my mother. And I contacted the American consulate and they were no help. I had one other agent who reached out to a physician that was able to locate the medication for me, but luckily by this time, it was time for my mom to be medevaced out. So I'm going to say this to agents who are wondering, does insurance do what it does? The insurance do what it says it's going to do? I don't know if that's proper English, but you get it. Does it? Does it cover what you think it's going to cover? And what would happen if you had a solo traveler? How would they invoke their insurance? How would they get a letter of guarantee? What way would you protect your traveler if they were by themselves? Luckily, I was there and I knew what I needed to do in order to make things happen. But what would your client do if they were traveling alone? How would they know where their insurance policy was? If your traveler is incapacitated, who would facilitate for them these processes and procedures? Do they have an emergency contact? And if they have an emergency contact, does that emergency contact know how to go ahead and invoke these policies and procedures? These are really things that need to be really examined very closely in our industry. I reached out even to our American Express Platinum, where initially I was told they could not assist in any way. They could only facilitate, which wasn't going to help me at all. Later, finding out from upper management who reached out to me in regards to this scenario, they were able to reimburse me for a second medevac. Because remember, the first medevac does one thing only: take you to the nearest aiding facility that is deemed capable by your insurance company of handling the type of medical services or treatment that you need. So that being said, it was in Miami, but we needed to be in Oklahoma. So what does this mean? This means I need a second medevac. That was looking to cost me $26,000. The company that we use was Air Ambulance Worldwide. They were amazing. I had actually researched them prior last year due to COVID. They were phenomenal. However, they do not submit to insurance, so you definitely would have to pay out of pocket for that. We luckily ended up getting reimbursed from our Amex. So you also need to understand, what does the credit card that you're using have in regards to travel insurance protection? How is it facilitated? Those are really things you really need to know and understand. As agents, as advisors, we need to know more in-depth information, and I'm going to be reaching out to several of the insurers in travel to get more in-depth insight. Just to let you guys know, and I'm guilty of this, I use Allianz, and they're not even on the top 10 list for Forbes as travel insurance to use. So it's just something to take in consideration. I know we use Travel Guard mostly and Allianz, but they're not even on the top 10 list. So that is something you definitely want to maybe reconsider, especially if you're doing high ticket travel. That's something you want to take in consideration, as well as the actual services that are going to be rendered by the physicians or the medical staff. $50,000 sounds like a lot, but when we left out of there, we were at a $79,000 bill, just to kind of give you some insight on what that looks like. So if you want to know more details of just how things unfolded, please feel free to reach out to me, 813-917-4122, or you can reach out to me via social media. I'm posting this on my YouTube because I know there were so many agents that were just asking like, oh my gosh, what happened? And I know a lot of your encounters may not have been this severe, but this is the most extreme, and this is what we need to be prepared and ready for. The most extreme, not the breaking of a leg or anything, but heart attacks or strokes, or God forbid, a death. You need to understand, will your insurance be in place? Is it enough insurance? And what is enough for different destinations? You know, what may not be enough in Mexico may be more than enough in Germany or Switzerland or Spain or Africa. You need to understand exactly what your insurance is covering. And the main and most important part of that is treatment of services. You need to have at least $500,000 of coverage for treatment of services, because $50,000 can be used in a matter of a blink of an eye. And if you've got an unscrupulous country, and I hate to say that about Mexico because I've been traveling there since 2020, but I think it's really sad and unfair that they treat Americans that way, and that our government isn't looking more into making sure that they have better best practices when it comes to medical treatment for Americans, because they are going to squeeze out of you as much money as possible. If that insurance company would have said 70, they would have charged me 70. And there's no way for us to have any repercussion to knowing, because they don't use the same medical codes as we do in America, so that we can make sure that we're being charged properly. So this is something that you really want to make sure that you're abreast on. And if you have spoken with your travel insurance provider, you really need to ask these questions. How do I know that I'm getting the right treatment, or the cost factor is the right cost? These are things you need to make sure you're aware of. And again, it's been a long journey, but my mom's in a slow recovery process. And I just wanted to share this so that no one else has to go through the hell I endured while I was traveling to Mexico. So thanks, guys. And remember, stay traveled.